Jack Sully, Vice President for Unifor 707A, on loan to the Unifor National, conducting a lobby meeting with...
My name is Chris Jones. I'm the federal candidate for the NDP here in Sherwood Park-Fort Saskatchewan.
Nice. So I guess we'll kind of just get right into the key election items coming up. Prior to, I'd say, a month ago, it was basically an axe the tax platform for the federal election, but now that's been taken care of, and with Trudeau being removed or resigning and being replaced, that is also the other big thing that was happening.
It's like they say, a week in politics is a year, right?
Yes.
Lots changes.
So now this whole election is kind of turning into a who's best to deal with Trump.
Yeah.
So we'll get right into the very first question.
Sure.
How should the Canadian government respond to Trump's threat of tariffs?
I think that the Canadian government needs to respond to it in the sense that it isn't a threat of tariffs. He's made it very clear it has everything to do with annexing Canada, using economic sanctions and slowly weakening our economy to a point where, we are beholden to them. And he's made it very clear he doesn't like the Canadian border. He doesn't want to take away our anthem, but we can be a glorious 51st state. Mm-hmm. And I disagree with that. And I think all Canadians should disagree with that. The Canadian government has to take a very firm stance that we are not okay with him taking over Canada through economic means. So hiding behind these tariffs and yo-yoing back and forth. Today's a tariff, tomorrow's not a tariff. Right now it's 25%. Maybe on the second it'll be 50%. It has nothing to do with the tariffs. It has everything to do with weakening Canadians, weakening the Canadian economy, and making it so that it's easier to annex us.
Very good. So how do you think the government should respond in terms of the tariffs?
We have to just keep doing what we've been doing. Continue applying pressure to the United States and reminding them that we won't capitulate. We're not going to just roll over and say, well, I guess it's just easier to let you guys get away with whatever you want. We have been their friendly neighbor of the North for a long time. My entire life, I'm sure your entire life, has always been. Americans and Canadians are very similar. We have very similar values. And if you talk to everyday Americans, I'm sure they're on the same page. That being said, we are Canadians. I don't want to be similar to Puerto Rico. I don't want to be a protectorate or a territory of the United States. So I think carrying on with the retaliatory tariffs and having a very firm stance that no, we're not going to give an inch just to try and appease.
Right.
It's a moving goalpost. I mean, it started off, well, it's fentanyl and criminals crossing the border. Well, now it's you're taking advantage of us, and it's you guys are taking advantage of us with dairy tariffs, even though they're not reaching the variable tariff threshold. So it really is a complicated situation, and there's not a simple solution, but we need to stand firm for sure.
Yep. So some things that Unifor is actually recommending that all parties will commit to once the federal election is concluded is targeted and strategic tariff retaliation and bringing provinces together to negotiate with one voice. I think that is a very important thing in trying to have a united Canadian front in response to the tariffs that Trump is imposing. You did mention something very interesting in your initial response, though, was about becoming a territory of the states. Mm-hmm. I would agree that is even more of a crisis than becoming a 51st state.
Yes.
A lot of people think that it would be easier to become a 51st state, and I would disagree.
That would be the case.
That would change the entire constitution in order for that to happen out of the states. I see the threat of us becoming a territory being even worse. As a territory, yes, we would be able to elect our own governor, but we wouldn't have representation in the House or in the Senate. So we'd have no control over any of our natural resources or how any of it is extracted or exposed. So
no, exactly.
I'm glad you brought that up.
That's
it's
exactly
something
right.
that a lot of I haven't heard from a lot of the other interviews so far. So speaking of a united Canadian front, how can Canada rebuild production capacity?
Well, like I said, it's not a simple solution, and it will take time. As we've already seen, using alcohol as an example, there's a lot more of a focus on getting cross-provincial trade going. Mm-hmm. Something that this, unfortunately, is pointing out is how many barriers we've instituted in between provinces. Come on. Hey, come here. It's showing that it's harder to trade across provinces than it is to trade with our neighbors to the south. So we do have to start having, as you said, a united front, a united Canada, having more interprovincial trade, and to start basically bolstering our own production. It's not something that'll be easy, though. It's not something that's going to happen quickly.
Right.
It's something we should have been doing for decades. And unfortunately, we've just kind of gotten comfortable with our neighbors to the south being there for us and helping provide any shortcomings we have in our own production. So it's something that would potentially generate a lot of jobs here in Canada, though, and give us a lot of Canadian pride. I mean, that's something that's really been popping up with this whole American situation, is folks are flying their flags and being proud to be Canadian, which we should be.
Yeah, so you're basically speaking to like the value added projects in Canada, such as refineries or actual lumber mills that would create, lumber instead of just the logs that get sent somewhere else to be turned into lumber and then us purchasing back.
Exactly.
So that's also something Unifor is recommending, bolstering Canada's capacity to produce, process, refine, and transform our raw materials into an end product that's ready for the user.
I mean, it made sense to take our raw material and ship it to the States. It's sort of we scratch your back, you scratch our back type situation, but obviously that's kind of coming to a close. I mean, there's all of this trade war taking over Canada stuff that's going on. So we definitely have to focus on helping ourselves out.
And then the other thing is to consider ways, in consultation with all the provinces and their own resources, essentially, to manage the outflow of rare earth minerals, critical minerals, lumber, oil, gas, all the different like potash, aluminum, all the different industries that Canada has, to try to manage the outflow of it and not just send everything to the States. And hopefully we can open more trade with other countries. So those are kind of what Unifor is recommending there. Do you have any ideas about how Canada can reinvest in our domestic economy?
Well, I mean, I am just a pipe fitter. I just pull wrenches for a living, so I can't say that there's a one solution to any of that. I really do think that Canada has always been in a position to be a world leader when it comes to research and development, when it comes to producing, like you say, taking our own natural resources and producing products with them. I do think that if we just focus on diversifying and making it so that Canadians are making our own Canadian-made product, it's a great way to generate a lot of jobs. But it's not a simple solution. It's not going to happen overnight.
It's definitely not an overnight solution.
Yeah.
So Unifor's kind of looking at reinvesting strategically in the domestic economy through supporting sector-specific industry, like we mentioned earlier, increasing our capacity to refine and create the product
Go on.
here in Canada that end user ready. How would an NDP government support workers affected by the impacts of tariffs?
Well, the NDP, the reason I'm running for the NDP is it's the only party that supports me. As a worker, they're the only party that has always said that they want to help unions. They want to ensure that we have good paying wages. So folks are going to be affected by tariffs. We're definitely going to see an issue with lots of downturn in the economy where people all of a sudden aren't getting as much business. I mean, it's a two-way street. Now that we're having this trade war with the United States, there's going to be a loss of jobs, and we just need to try our best to try and generate more jobs as quickly as possible. I mean, obviously investing in Canadian futures, investing in having jobs here at home. It'll take time. It's not something that can happen quickly, and it's going to be a difficult period for sure.
So one thing Unifor is recommending is improving access to employment insurance. We saw during COVID, it just wasn't where it needed to be.
Yeah.
There was a lot of Canadians that struggled through it, and Canada ended up having to create a new program, essentially, the CERB, and then,
And that was rushed through and wasn't very well monitored. There was lots of folks that were maybe not using it the right way.
Yeah.
And that is something that the NDP is looking at, is increasing the EI amount, because at the moment, EI really doesn't cover anything. I mean, your average rent is what, $1,500 a year in Edmonton per month? Your EI once you pay for your rent, how you buy groceries.
Right.
So it definitely is something that needs to be readdressed. It hasn't caught up with inflation at all, and it isn't going to be enough. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, we need to readdress it and make it so it actually does what it's supposed to do.
Right.
Is make it so you can get from being unemployed to your next job without losing everything.
Yes. That's also part of what Unifor is recommending in terms of the EI, is also increasing the income support to offset, a greater share of your income loss in the face of a layoff, and more accessible qualifying rules, making it easier accessible for a greater range of Canadians. Because as we saw during COVID again, there was a lot of Canadians that just didn't qualify for whatever reason. Another thing Unifor is recommending is identifying key government objectives, so sustaining Canadian operations where possible. So by keeping Canadian companies in Canada and supporting those companies, the small, medium-sized companies, as opposed to the large corporate companies that have their headquarters elsewhere but still support Canadian workers in a sense. So Unifor would like to see more of a focus on the Canadian owned and operated businesses here in Canada and offering them supports where we can.
Yeah, and absolutely. As a member of the NDP and as a candidate, that's something that absolutely I can get behind. I mean, small and medium business. I have multiple family members that like to be their own boss, run flower shop, or run my father, now that he's retired, he actually does wooden organizational items that he sells at farmers markets, right? So he's running his own business, and having folks be able to do that and now go, holy cow, I'm actually further behind now than when I got started.
Yeah.
So definitely we need to support Canadian made for and stop giving all of these benefits to the massive corporations. As you said, like, they aren't even headquartered here in Canada. So,
right.
I mean, they do serve a purpose. It is great to have employment, and we need the larger companies as well. But here in Alberta, for example, we've seen lots of times where we're giving out massive tax credits to these companies, and now we're paying them extra money to clean up the oil wells, for example, that they've abandoned, even though they're legally obligated. But let's pay them more to do, it doesn't make any sense.
Not only have they been paid by the Alberta government, they were also already paid by the federal government.
And now we're paying them again.
Yes.
To do something that they already have to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously, when folks get upset about government getting involved and getting in the way of big business, we need to understand that they're making lots of money, and they definitely need to do their share to take care of the environment and give back to Canadians.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What is one thing that you think stands in the way of across provincial border trade right now in Canada?
Well, I think a big part of it is the premiers have to learn how to play nice. Right now, we have a lot of different big personalities in every province. I think that's pretty obvious. You have premiers in each province that want to do what's right for their own people, which is great. But we need to go work Canadian first. And right. I mean, like with this whole Trump situation, we have seen a lot of unifying Canadians, lots of provinces that are saying, hey, we should work together, and we just need to get that momentum going and say, like, it's understandable you want to do what's right. If you're the Premier of Alberta, you want to do what's right for Alberta, obviously. But we need to think about Canada as a whole, as a nation. Motivating yourself to only do what's right for your province is not going to make us a strong nation.
Right.
And I understand that a lot of folks point out and say, well, Alberta, we make so much economic benefit. We're one of the few provinces that constantly is in the black economically. Why should we have to give back so much? And it's because we're Canadian. We should be supporting our country as a whole. And sometimes that means helping out those that have less.
Absolutely.
And I mean, that seems like such a simple concept, but we just need to have the provinces play nice and start trading with each other a little more easily. Like I said, it's easier to trade with America than it is to trade with your province next door sometimes. Yeah. So we need to address that and have them fix it.
Absolutely. So another thing Unifor is hoping for is the deployment of a program like the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy Program for eligible companies in trade-dependent sectors and communities to keep Canadians working. We saw during, again, COVID, there was a lot of companies that accessed this type of program, but then they would still lay off their workers and then pay their shareholders the large tax dividends and, things like that. So we would like to see more stringent rules around a program such as that, if it were to be in place, to prevent these larger corporations from taking advantage of it on the backs of workers.
No, absolutely. And I agree completely. I saw the same thing. Like I said, I know of some people that, even just individually, that took advantage of CERB, that they didn't lose their job. They were essential. They kept working. Their wages weren't affected, but they still claimed CERB because, well, free money. And it wasn't regulated as well as it should have been, for sure.
Okay. I don't think I have any other questions in relation to the tariffs or anything that's going on with the Trump administration. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to give to try to sway voters your way?
Well, all I can say is I'm just a pipe fitter. I'm a regular guy. I have 2 kids and a wife, and I'm trying to do what's best for my family, like all of us.
Mm-hmm.
I look at what's going on, and it can be stressful and it can be scary, but I also go, you know what? We have an opportunity to be the best place to live. I mean, I love being in Alberta. I love that I'm Canadian, and I'm so happy that I'm starting to see a lot more Canadian pride. So when it comes to me voting for me, I would love if you would vote for me. What I can say is I don't have all the answers, but I sure as heck want to find the answers and try to make things better if I can. I'm not interested in growing my portfolio. I don't have stocks. I don't have rental properties. I don't have a summer vacation home. I go tenting on Crownland. You know, I'm just trying my best to make things better if I can.
Right.
And if that appeals to you, that's awesome. You know, but I'm also not one to blow smoke and tell tall tales and make all these promises, and then, hey, you didn't fulfill any of that because you promised us everything and didn't give it to us. Right. So if you're looking for someone that you can get a hold of and just is willing and happy to talk with you about what is upsetting you or what you're interested in talking about when it comes to being your elected official, then I'm your guy. You know, that's kind of who I am, and by all means, you know, yeah, not much else.
Excellent.
I appreciate you coming to interview me.
Of course.
It's
good. The election hasn't been called yet,
No.
obviously. There are some rumors that it might be Sunday, anytime from now till Sunday.
Absolutely.
That
I mean, if I was Mark Carney, I would probably want to call it before everyone sits. That would be prevent a vote of no confidence.
Prevent the vote of no confidence, and also not give the opportunity for other parties to get a platform on record at the House of Commons, right?
Yes.
And the other part of it too, the Conservatives and, well, the Liberals have a lot as well of money that they've already raised, more through corporate donations for certain parties. When it comes to the attack ads and stuff like that, right? So the sooner an election gets called, the less of that money can actually be used
and I
for
say,
those.
I'll tell you now, those attack ads just drive me crazy. I'm not one to throw mud. I look at it, you get your hands dirty when you're slinging mud. You know, it doesn't look good on anybody. I don't understand. Everyone I've talked to wants to hear, what are you going to do different, not what is that guy doing wrong.
Yeah.
And you see these attack ads. I mean, I'll go to the gym and I'll see it on the TV and they're already running them.
Yeah.
And it's just like, man, can we just have an election without just pointing out how everyone is worse than me?
Yeah, I feel over the last probably, 2 for sure federal elections, we've seen a lot more of the American style campaigning come into Canada. And even now, with a lot of people saying, oh, well, Mark Carney's an unelected prime minister. Well, we don't vote for a prime minister in Canada. We have a Westminster parliamentary system, which is entirely different from how the states runs theirs, right?
Well, I've had that conversation so many times that, I'm running for the NDP to represent 120,000-ish people that live in this riding.
Yeah.
The number of people that get elected, that ends up picking the leader. It's not, you're not voting for Mark Carney, you're not voting for Pierre Poilievre, you're not voting for Jagmeet Singh, you're voting for the party. And ideally, you're voting for the representative in your riding. It shouldn't be, well, I just vote for my party because it's my party because it's my party. It should be what makes sense for you and your riding.
Absolutely.
Because we're not America. In the States, you are just kind of voting for
one or the other.
The one person or the other. And that's not a system I want to have.
Yeah.
I like that we have multiple parties. I like that we have choices.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's everything from my end. Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
And
no.
thank you for the hospitality at your home. And
Oh, yeah, of course.
yeah, hopefully I get to see you again soon in some campaign somewhere.
No, right on.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I just met with Chris Jones, NDP candidate for Fort Saskatchewan Sherwood Park, or Sherwood Park-Fort Saskatchewan, I think is the actual term. Had a really great conversation with him about tariffs and responses of the Canadian government and how things should happen. He's a big fan of Labour. He comes from a blue-collar workforce. He's got a lot of great things to say. If I was in this riding, it's definitely somebody I would consider voting for. He's got strong family values, work ethic, and I think he'd be great for the community.